What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Okay, what is going on, everybody? Happy Monday night. If you're a Bengal fan, you finally get a win. It's been a while. And if you're a Cowboy fan, that one's going to be tough. You lose half your team. You're missing offensive linemen. You lose Overshown, who's become I think, like an up-and-coming star to what looks like potential devastating knee injury. And then you're still in a position to win the game. You block the freaking punt, and then you don't because somehow your guy screws up, and it ends up with the Bengals. A couple plays later, Jamar Chase is in the end zone. The Bengals win 27-20. Parsons storms off. And even it felt like Troy Aikman was a little shell-shocked. So it's the NFL, man. These Monday night games are hard to beat because even when the matchup doesn't look great on paper, it delivers. And I thought tonight was the second half was pretty entertaining. So we'll dive into the game. We'll hit a little bit on the Penthouse and the Outhouse. I'm getting a little tired of talking about the bad teams. So maybe we'll kind of focus on the high end of the league. Belichick to North Carolina. The Eagles looks like they might got some issues. Quarterbacks and people are down on them, the wide receivers, and this is why you get paid the big bucks if you're the head coach, because these are the type problems. Even when you've won 9 straight games, you got to figure out a way to kind of make everyone somewhat be on the same page. And good luck to Sirianni. Amazon Prime shattering records. And a couple quick thoughts on Juan Soto, because that contract was pretty bananas. 15 years, $760 million. I guess, if you can hit a baseball and yeah, it pays. It pays. I saw someone put out the A-Rod contract. I remember being a kid. I guess I was like 15 or 16 when he signed that $250 million deal in 2000, which felt like $7 billion. Which I bet when you factor in inflation and everything, it's probably still not as much, but this $760 million, we had a couple, him and Ohtani making a lot of money. But before we dive into this football game, you got Christmas right around the corner, Hanukkah right around the corner. It's time to give gifts. Giving gifts is hard, especially the older you get, right? The Christmas no longer really becomes about you. It becomes about others. If you have little children, if you have older children, if you have parents, if you have a wife, if you have people in your life that you want to take care of, it's like, what do I get them? And I tell you this, get them tickets. The official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time, they have you covered. If you want to go to a game, if you want to go to a concert, if you want to go to a fun event, just download the Game Time app. You can search by venue. You can search by the event. If you want to go to the Notre Dame playoff game, if you want to go to a Packer playoff game, whatever event you want to go to, they got you covered. So here's the thing. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. It's funny. Right around the fourth quarter, you start kind of laying out your angles of what you want to discuss on the game and the reaction for the podcast. And I felt pretty confident. I was like, I think the Cowboys might win this game. And my angle was going to be pretty simply like, listen, they've won 3 straight games. Jerry mentioned a week or two ago that it's very realistic that McCarthy comes back. It'd be hard to argue that firing McCarthy, like, what are your other options? Especially if you're not going to, like, hire Belichick. Jerry's 80-plus years old. It's easy to just keep him. Tonight was, if they would have won, missing their star guard, their center gets KO'd early in the game. One of their stud defensive young players looks like he rips up his knee. You got a backup quarterback because Dak's hamstring ripped off the bone 5 weeks ago. I mean, your team's just in complete shambles. Yet win, Monday Night Football, block a punt. It feels like you're going to win. Then all of a sudden, some dude that you just elevated a week or two ago touches a ball past the line of scrimmage. And I will say in a situation like that, once you play college football, for years in the meeting, that is discussed. It is hammered home in every program in college that when the ball is blocked on a field goal or a kick and it crosses the line of scrimmage, you don't touch it. And because it was fourth and whatever, 28, if a Bengals player picks it up because it's a live ball, obviously you tackle them, but you do not try to be a hero. Behind the line of scrimmage, all for it. Try to be a hero, scoop and score, have a touchdown. Cowboys obviously got a little unlucky in the sense that the ball went past the line of scrimmage. But that player, like it honestly leaves me speechless. Like that is football 101 at the highest level. And to me, that's something that you've learned. Like once you get to college, you know basic math. So if you're going to go into architecture or engineering, like you have a basic understanding of numbers. Now, I'm sure, listen, I'm not an architect or an engineer. I'm sure you learn things. And I went to school at an engineering school, which all those kids spent a lot of time in the library and in the classroom. It's very, very difficult. But they could not have had a chance to pass any classes in college if they would not have passed math classes in high school and had a fundamental understanding of numbers. It's no different in football. Like you don't get to the NFL without knowing like several basic rules. And I would say when a punt is blocked and it goes past the line of scrimmage, that is something consistent that you could go around the NFL to any, some of these star wide receivers that maybe have never played special teams and don't really sit in on special teams meetings. And if they do check out, maybe some of them might not know the rule. But any defensive back or any backup wide receiver linebacker, 1,000,000% has heard that hundreds of times. Like that is football 101. And I am very, very quick to be critical of coaches, coordinators, head coaches. That's on the player. Like that's inexcusable. Like that just, it's like football 101. And it sucks. And to me, it sucks for the Cowboys players. You got McCarthy, I thought, coaching his ass off. You got Dwaddle running his ass off. Cooper Rush, who I think a couple years ago I said, what the hell is the difference between him and Dak? Well, it's pretty big. Cooper Rush isn't that great. I give McCarthy a ton of credit for just having this team consistently play this hard and be in a position tonight to win a game with so many of these random players. I mean, his offensive line is a mash unit put together. His quarterback, by every series, you're like, I don't know if I trust this guy throwing the ball. That losing, one of their star players on defense has to be pretty, I would say, deflating. And then that moment, once that punt situation happens, you just, they could have had 10 timeouts. They could have had an unlimited amount of timeouts. It felt like Cowboys were not going to tie that game up. Now, some people I saw said that Chase should have hit the ground at like the 5-yard line. Yeah, it's easy to say. You're running. What a season that guy's having. But that is one of those for the Cowboys. Listen, even if they win tonight and they go to 6-7, it's not like they're making the playoffs. But they could have one of those years where you end up going 8-9 and you go, that's a hell of a year for McCarthy. And yeah, the Cowboys bring him back. They give him a 2-year contract extension. And honestly, this might not change that because you look around. I get asked questions all the time like, should the Bears be interested in McCarthy? If McCarthy's available, should the Giants give him a call? Because he's good with quarterbacks. He's good with the offense. And his team's still playing really, really hard. And I think it's pretty well established. Like this kind of falls on Jerry's feet as the general manager more than it does Mike. And listen, we can argue till we're blue in the face how good Dak is, how good he's not, where he ranks. But there's clearly, I mean, think about the gap between him and Cooper Rush. Think about the gap then between Cooper Rush and Trey Lance. I mean, I'm watching Cooper Rush and going, yeah, He has some moments, like some series, then you watch other series, you're like, what was that? But that's a backup quarterback who makes a couple $1 million and still had him in a position to win. Now, the Bengals defense, here's the other thing. There are some arguments that are just fun sports arguments, and they're real sports arguments, right? Like Dak Prescott has been one of the more polarizing players his entire career. And I think both sides of the argument have always been felt pretty good about their position, right? How good is he? He's better than you think. He's actually overrated. Cousins fell into this forever when I was in the Bay with Derek Carr with the Raiders. He has fallen into that category. You know, you get guys like I think Kyler Murray's in that now. Purdy's been in and out of it. Like these are real arguments that people are don't need to just make up a side, right, to have an argument. If you argue anything other than Joe Burrow's not one of the best players in the NFL, and I'm a big believer of wins and losses, usually if your quarterback is good over the course of several years, you're going to win a lot more games than you're going to lose if you have a good quarterback. It's inevitable. It's basically impossible to not be a competitive team if you have a high-end quarterback. And over the course of Burrow's career, the Bengals have been awesome. They made it to a Super Bowl. They went to an AFC Championship game. They've been really, really good, right? No one would dispute that. But this year, when it looked like they were 4-8 and the Cowboys blocked the punt, and for a split second you're like they're going to lose and go to 4-9, it just simply would not have been on him. It doesn't mean he hasn't made bad plays in certain games. He threw a bad pass early in the game over Chase's head on an out route. He had a pretty, I would say, a below average throw that led to an interception that airmailed Chase. But I looked during the game at some of their defensive stats. I mean, they are putrid. I mean, on the most basic level, they give up 28.3 points per game, which is 31st in the NFL. And then I looked at Burrow, some of his stats when he's thrown 3 or more touchdowns. Obviously, the 2 Ravens games, he threw 9 touchdowns, 4 in one game and 5 in another, and they lost both games. He has had 3 other games where he's thrown 3 touchdowns and they've lost. He now, I guess with that 3rd touchdown, he's got 33 touchdowns in 13 games. Like he's on pace for a 40 plus touchdown season. And Aikman mentioned it when he said, "Are you playing the best football of your life?" And Burrow looked at him and said, "Yeah, by far." Peyton Manning called him, said he's having an MVP season. His team is just letting him down. And this is the weird thing that we get into Zach Taylor because you watch Joe Burrow, you go, he really can do it all. He is an elite pocket quarterback, right? An elite pocket quarterback. Like that, when you think of Joe Burrow, that's where he thrives, in the pocket. But then his athletic ability, while it's not, Jalen Hurts or Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson, he is a pretty damn good athlete. And his throwing on the move is exceptional. It's one thing to throw on to your throwing side, right outside the pocket. If you're a right-handed quarterback, throw right. It's another thing to be able to run back left and throw across his body, which he had to throw tonight. And even Aikman's like, damn, that was a dime. And then they talked about how he wears the knee brace. And Troy's like, when I tried to wear the knee brace, it really slowed me down. You watch Joe Burrow, you can't even tell the difference. Obviously, his cohesion with Jamar Chase is just, it's elite. And it's been like that since LSU. But this gets to Zach Taylor, who, I think is a pretty polarizing coach. And, being a head coach is about more than just coaching the offense, even when you're the offensive coordinator. It's where McVay and Kyle have gotten a lot of credit. They're the offensive coordinator, but their defenses on most of their teams have been good. This defense is atrocious. Now, I would also say with the Bengals, Mike Brown, the owner, like Jerry Jones, is essentially the GM, and him and Duke Tobin are picking all the players. It's not like Zach Taylor has any pull that way. So it's not his fault, the defense, which has let guys walk in recent years. Now, part of that is Burrow's contract, but it is not, it's just bad. I mean, they have mainly been atrocious. Hell, I mean, they were in position where they were going to lose to the Cowboys tonight and potentially give up easily. I mean, if they would have scored on that block punt, maybe 27 points to Cooper Rush. That's not good. And, Lou Anarumo, I think, had mentioned tonight on the broadcast, in the production meetings, like, listen, we're just trying to get like one more stop. We're not trying to be one of the best defenses. We're just trying to get off the field one more time than we've been getting off. I mean, it's basically admitting like we're not that good, even though they have I mean, easily one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Hilton's actually kind of like him, makes some plays, but also gives up some big plays. But the argument with Joe Burrow, like there is no argument to be had. If you know, like if you watch football and you watch him play and your takeaway isn't, yeah, it's one of the best players, I don't know, currently in the NFL. That guy's a stud. I'd want that guy on my team immediately. We probably don't have much in common when we're watching football. And this Bengals team clearly is going nowhere. And I think there's going to be question marks with the coach. I think here's the problem, though, is their coach is really good with the quarterback. I mean, they mentioned this tonight, and sometimes you forget. Like, Zach Taylor was even there the year before Joe Burrow came. So Joe Burrow's entire career has been under his watch with him calling the plays. And he's pretty good at it, right? Now, I know he drives people crazy, specifically some game time situations. And obviously, this team has underachieved this year, but offensively, they've been pretty elite. And if you've watched Hard Knocks, Tomlin was talking about like Chase Brown's a really kind of dynamic player. He's definitely really good in the passing game. So you got Chase, you got Higgins. Uh, I I think they're just pretty good offensively. Gasecki made a couple plays, but what separates them is Burrow's ability to just basically dominate in every aspect of the passing game. Short game, timing, elite. Intermediate game, I mean, how many times did he hit slants or plays over the middle of the night that are just like, Jesus? And obviously his touch on deeper breaking routes is just top notch. I mean, that's what just a high-end elite all-pro player looks like. In some years, because it is the ultimate team game. This is not basketball. If Joe Burrow was a basketball player, his team would be in the playoffs. He would will his team to 45 wins, no matter how shitty everyone else was around him. Right? In baseball, he would put up all-star elite numbers, and no one even win or losing has nothing to do with one individual. But in football, like you do need help. And no matter if you have the best season of your career as a quarterback and you throw 45 touchdowns, if your defense is giving up 30 points a game, I don't give a shit what you're doing. You're going to lose a lot of games. Like I said, they lost 2 Ravens games where he threw a total of 9 touchdowns. He threw 9 touchdowns. Chase had 5 of them. They lost them both. That's pretty embarrassing. And in one of them, they had double-digit leads multiple times in the fourth quarter. So it's just not on Joe Burrow. And it's really not on their offense for the most part because it feels like they have come to play. And sometimes just one of those years. Like the Cowboys, like kind of understandable. Roster wasn't that great, and then a million injuries, and it's just kind of fallen out. And obviously the play tonight probably cost them the game. The Bengals, I mean, say start to finish, their defense has been atrocious. And like legitimately, statistically, one of the worst defenses in the league. I looked at some of their yards they're giving up per passing, per game passing was like 27th, 28th. Every defensive category, it's like near the bottom, second to last. You can't function like that. You don't need to be the Ravens of last year, like one across the board, but you can't be right next to like the Panthers and have a chance to win football games. So very entertaining second half. And yeah, that's a killer loss for the Cowboys. Not that it would have like the overall outcome to the season wouldn't have changed much, but that's got to hurt. The NFL season is rolling along and the contenders are separating from the pack. The one thing that hasn't changed this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And it's the number one place to bet touchdowns. Long bombs, fades to the end zone, big runs, you name it. We do not care how you get them. We just want to bet touchdowns at DraftKings, and it's the best place to do it. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player scoring a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your first pick. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance on their own. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets. If your bet wins, just bet $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. I was thinking about it today. Like, one thing that's cool about once we start doing the Penthouse and the Outhouse is the Porta Potty Panthers have become not just like a real team, like they're pretty good. They're very watchable. I said this on yesterday's podcast. If you watch the Titans versus the Jags, you're a sicko. And you're the type of sicko that I like because you either had money on it or you just enjoy the suck because that game was atrocious. Those two teams suck. If you are a Raider fan and you consistently watch your team every week, hat tip to you because that is a god awful football team. If you're a Giants fan and you spend your Sundays for 3+ hours watching Brian Daboll and Drew Lock, I heard Michael Lombardi say today that he had 49 pass attempts. You just, more power to you. I just don't have much energy. Honestly, when these two teams play each other now, like I don't even watch these games. Nothing that happened in that Jags Titans game matters at all to anybody beside maybe a Titans or Jags fan, or if you work for the team. But I got to give the Panthers credit because we named them the Porta Potty Panthers. They were the worst team we'd ever seen. And then Bryce Young came back, and they have just been really good. I mean, if you watch them against the Eagles and you watch them against the Chiefs, it was impressive. I mean, obviously, it's been well documented. They were a drop pass away from winning the game. But I think if you watch Bryce Young, and I know a lot of Panther fans have been hitting me up like, what do you think? What do you think? I would say this game and the Chiefs game, but specifically this game, the Eagles clearly have a lot of elite talent near the line of scrimmage and in their front seven. Guys that can run, guys that can move. And his constant ability to make guys miss, kind of break a little arm tackle in the backfield, keep a play alive and be a playmaker and get rid of the ball and complete passes was really, really impressive. Because when he was early on playing, it was like you couldn't even function with the kid. It was sad as someone that, I was a Saban Bama guy. I watched a lot of them over the last decade. And I loved Bryce Young as a player. And that guy that we had witnessed last year and then even early on this year there wasn't any parallels to the guy we witnessed at Bama. Obviously, the body language, the confidence, it was all gone. And this guy, these last 3 or 4 weeks, it looks like the Alabama guy. It looks like, I don't want to say like a future high end player, but it's a completely different human. So I don't feel bad about writing him off because one, he still is small, but he's just a solid football player now. He wasn't just not a good football player. He looked like a minor league guy. He looked like he should go to the USFL. So they're no longer the Porta Potty Panthers. They're a real NFL team. I think when we look at the high end of the league, like I said it from the beginning, the Chiefs were just going nowhere. They were on scholarship, and they still are there because we can nitpick and argue till we're blue in the face. They've won 9 straight AFC titles, and they've won 1,000,000 games on the last possession. And I think I read or saw a headline that they're the first team in NFL history to have like 3 walk-off kicks with 3 different kickers in the same season. Listen, if you got home field, I don't give a shit how average their offense is. I don't care how depleted their defense is with injuries. Good luck beating them at Arrowhead. Now, it might happen, probably will happen, but you would probably have to be somewhat of a lunatic to bet against them until it happens. I think when you look around the AFC, like, listen, the Bills have one of the most special quarterbacks we've ever seen. I would imagine if you're in a fantasy league and you have him, that's a pretty good day. 3 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, and 82 yards rushing. Doesn't get much better than that. If you are a Bills fan, it can't be much more entertaining than watch this player. But that was to come out so. Listen, I totally understand having like a little bit of a letdown, but then for them to flip the switch and them not being able to figure it out, that hurts. And every time I want to be like Bills Super Bowl, something like that happens. I don't know. And ultimately, they're going to probably have to go on the road, to win us to get to the Super Bowl. And it's got to go through Arrowhead and almost slay the beast. And listen, when I was a kid, Steve Young did it against the Dallas Cowboys. It is doable, but it is very, very difficult. I'm tempted to throw Pittsburgh. I was telling a buddy today in the league, like, I'm actually pretty impressed with Russell Wilson. We know he can throw the go route in the little lollipop. He made a couple passes in that game where you're like, damn. Kind of sidearm touchdown to Freiermuth. I think a touchdown was to Austin. I didn't have the sound on. He made 2 kind of similar touchdown passes in the red area that were just like, Russell's kind of vibing right now. And listen, it's a big game this weekend. We got the Eagles, kind of got some weird shit going on. The Steelers, that Hard Knocks is going to be fantastic with Tomlin just getting the boys fired up in the defensive meeting. whoever wins that game, like if the Eagles win that game with everything going on with AJ Brown and Jalen, that's an impressive win. If the Steelers go in there and win, it's like, damn, this maybe they are just a real contender. Obviously, they're going to the playoffs. I mean, they're like a win away from being a borderline. I mean, the Ravens can't really afford to drop a game. They could easily win the division, get a home game, hell, potentially 2 home games. Uh, I'm tempted to buy in. You go to Philly, you win that game, you might have wrote me in. This might be a 3-horse race. Uh, Especially, I guess, I don't want to totally count out the Ravens yet, but something's just been off with them all season long. And then to me, that Lions win, and I had some people come at me like, oh, the Packers had injuries too. They literally were missing their entire defensive line. They signed Jamal Adams off the couch and immediately played him. Jamal Adams. Like, come on. There's a different level. Now, their offense was healthy for the most part. I mean, they actually were missing their left tackle in that game. But they got a huge game this week. We got Bills, Lions, Steelers, Eagles. That's the best part, like, about down the stretch is a lot of these teams are playing each other. So I think it's going to really crystallize once we, for the most part, at least in the AFC, I think the Chiefs, I don't want to say cemented as the one, but we feel pretty confident that's where they're going to be. The NFC, I mean, all of a sudden the Eagles win. What if the Lions were to lose and Minnesota loses a game? All of a sudden it's like, damn, the Eagles are the 1 seed. What if the Eagles lose and the Lions lose and Minnesota wins? And they're the 1 seed. So we got a very, very fluid situation in the NFC. One thing we know is the Kirk Cousins and the Falcons are in shambles. And Tampa, is technically winning that division, but they play the Chargers. They lose that game. Atlanta wins a game. It could flip-flop because they beat them twice, so they're going to have the tiebreaker there. But it's getting fun. Okay, let's dive into some stories around the football world. Let's start with Bill Belichick, who went on with McAfee and addressed the elephant in the room, his potential coaching at the University of North Carolina. And I think a couple things are clearly happening, right? One, I think Belichick is acknowledging that there is no guarantee that he's going to be a coach in the NFL. He's seen over the last couple of years a lot of these teams basically lean into a committee. Their coach, their GM, their president, it's like a board of directors. They all work together. That is not the NFL Bill Belichick came up in and then the one that he thrived in. It was a dictatorship when he worked for Parcells and then when he became a head coach. It was one guy who made the decisions. Now, ultimately, one person has to make the decisions. It's why all these organizations that have become like a board of directors feel like they're struggling because they got too many cooks in the kitchen. And Bill Belichick has to go, well, one, the Jets' job is off limits. He would never take it. They would never hire him. The Bears' job, Kevin Warren would never even acknowledge Bill Belichick's existence. The Jags' job, if you're Bill, you're like, do I want to coach this $200 million quarterback who might be a scrub? And then you go, depending on the other openings, like, what if they don't even call me? What if they don't even interview me? I mean, last year with all the openings, I only had one interview. So it might not happen. And God put me on this earth to coach football. It's been fun watching him on McAfee and watching him do some podcasts and TV hits and talk some shit. That has been cool. It has been very refreshing. But he should coach football. Why? Because that is his great talent. And at 72, 73 years old, like he can't afford to sit out multiple years and have this thing pass him by. So this story about North Carolina, which he not only acknowledged, I would say he did not run away from it at all. And obviously the changing landscape of NIL, the transfer portal, I would say feeds in to a guy like him who has a professional background of dealing with contract negotiations, of cutting players, of telling a guy you're not welcome anymore, of free agency. Like he's comfortable in that environment, an environment that a lot of these college coaches who are used to basically, I'm the grand poobah, and once I sign you on my team, you're kind of stuck here and you can never leave. They're uncomfortable with that. It's why they complain about it nonstop. Now, you could argue there are no rules or regulations. It's kind of a fucked up system right now. And there's some truth to that. But like The NFL is very comfortable with like, yeah, this guy can be a free agent. We got to make a decision on this guy's contract. Like that's what Bill Belichick's been doing for 50 years. And I think the North Carolina job, what are the questions you think he's asking? What are my financial resources? How much NIL money are we going to have? And the other thing he mentioned with McAfee is like, if I were to do this, if he said that a couple times, we would be a breeding ground for the NFL. And if you play for me, I'm getting you ready for that because I know that better than anyone in the collegiate world. I know how to get you ready to be a professional football player. If I was a guy, a high school recruit or a transfer portal guy, and I had aspirations to play in the NFL, and Bill Belichick was a head coach in the NFL, there is not a coach that I would rather play for. Now, it would not be easy, but playing for Kirby Smart is not easy. Playing for Nick Saban was not easy. Playing for good coaches is never going to be easy. But no one would have a better understanding of what it takes to be a good football player at the next level than this guy. So I completely understand why North Carolina is all in on him. And I think the other elephant in the room is, now he didn't talk about this. There have been reports on the interweb about this. Colin mentioned this when I went on the podcast with him yesterday. People in the league believe this is part of this interest is to get North Carolina to essentially name his son, Steve Belichick, who's currently the defensive coordinator at Washington, as the coach in waiting. And I think the natural reaction, if you just go on like the internet, everyone's like, oh, this is so unfair. This is bullshit, nepotism. It's like, here's my thing. And listen, I'm not in a position like Bill Belichick or LeBron James where I have unlimited leverage and I can do whatever I want. But I would also acknowledge part of working your whole life to be the best at what you do is to gain leverage to then not have to answer to anyone. And then also not have to do what everyone thinks you should do. You get to do whatever the hell you want to do. And my perception or my perspective on the LeBron James situation, I think it's probably different than most because my dad's dead. And do you know what I would do to like spend some time with him? I actually think like, listen, whether the guy should be there or not, of course, he's not an NBA player. We all understand that. But do I blame LeBron James for wanting to spend time with his son and forcing the Lakers where he has been yielding power for almost 2 decades? No, I completely understand it. What's the point of being the best, outworking everybody and lapping people for decades and then not using that power? That's the whole point of business. You don't get leverage that often. And when you do, you use it. And guess what happens to everyone that doesn't have it? They get jealous and they get pissed off. Why? Because the majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people, not only don't have it, they never will get it. So Bill Belichick, if he is going to be very interested in this situation, and part of it is Steve Belichick, well, that's his leverage. Now, you could also acknowledge or argue that if you're Steve Belichick or Bronny James, them doing this stuff makes life harder for you. And there's definitely some truth to that, right? Like having LeBron James tell the Lakers, well, he's not going to travel on road games, which, listen, has Bronny James ever been on a commercial air flight? My guess would be probably not. And if he has, I'd put that number over under at like 5.5 times ever walking into a normal airport, not a private jet hangar. So you think he's going to fly with the Poors in the G League? Come on. You think Belichick's just going to take the North Carolina job without some insane stipulations? This is a guy with $100 million in the bank and 6 Super Bowl rings. Of course he's going to have some crazy ass. That's the whole point of being in a position like Bill Belichick. And if that one of those asks is, one, my son is coaching with me, which they would have no problem with. I mean, any team hiring Bill Belichick, I'm sure he's going to hire Steve. But saying that my coach or Steve is going to be the coach in waiting, that's one of them. Like, I understand it. Who knows? I might do the same thing if I was a 72-year-old guy and had a 32-year-old son who I wanted to put in the best position possible. Isn't that why I work so hard the last 50, 60 years if I'm Bill Belichick? Is basically to do whatever I want. That's business. That's you work your whole life to get into a position where you answer to nobody. And if you do have to answer to someone, you have so much leverage that person, while they might be signing your checks or technically your boss, you're in control of what you're telling them to do. And that's the leverage Bill Belichick would have in this situation. So if that is ultimately how this plays out and he gets the North Carolina job and that stipulation is in there, everyone will freak out. And my reaction would be, well, yeah, it's probably a huge reason why he took the job. We talk about this all the time. Being a coordinator, being a position coach, how there's just not as much on your plate, right? And being a position coach is really hard. If you're an offensive line coach or a defensive line coach, you have a unit of 7, 8, 10 guys, bunch of different personalities. You don't control who's in that room when guys get injured and the GM and the head coach trade a guy, sign a guy. Like you just have to coach them. That's your job. You just coach who's ever in that room. And then once you become a coordinator, you're entrusted with calling the plays, with running the room, running the unit. So a lot more is on your plate. But still, like when anything happens, someone gets in trouble, there's contract disputes or negotiations. That's not your problem. Your job is just to design plays and coach at practice and get the game plan ready on a weekly basis. And then you become a head coach, and everything good and bad is on your table 24/7, 365. Think about this. The Eagles just tied a franchise record for 9 straight wins. You win 9 games in the NFL, you are having a fantastic season. It's borderline. I would say there's never been a 9-game winning streak in NFL history where a team didn't finish. I'd be shocked if they finished any lower than like the 2 seed. And the Eagles have, after starting 2-2 and looking weird, have had a fantastic season. I mean, Saquon Barkley looks like he's headed to shatter records, right? There's a potential. I think I saw today, if he runs for 483 yards, he will break the record for all-time yards in a season, which is really impressive, which is not good for Joe Schoen and the Giants. But part of being a head coach is it's easy to go, well, hey, shit's going to hit the fan. I gotta learn to handle it. Star player gets a DUI. Star player shatters his leg. There's a fight in your locker room after a 2-game losing streak. Your coaches, maybe 2 assistant coaches, hate each other. Maybe one of your assistant coaches and the assistant GM get into a screaming match in the hallway. I mean, who knows? We're talking big egos, big money, shit happening left and right. It's football. It's a contentious environment. But what about when you're having a lot of success and you're winning games and your star players are complaining? And that's what happened to Sirianni. You got A.J. Brown giving, I would say, somewhat of a bizarre press conference. You got Devontae Smith also saying essentially like, yeah, we're just off. Something is off. The rhythm is not there. These are 2 guys who are not in a contract year, who their stats ultimately don't impact their money at all. Both of them. A.J. Brown's now on his 2nd contract extension with the Eagles. Devontae Smith just got extended this offseason. Both of them make a boatload of money. And their team is literally thriving. The game against the Panthers was a little weird, but it was a trap game. They just kicked the shit out of Baltimore. But their passing game, and here's the thing, Jalen Hurts isn't Peyton Manning or Josh Allen or Mahomes or Lamar. Like, as a passer, he's flawed. He can make great plays, but I would not call him a consistent rhythm passer. And you watch them play, and I mean, he struggled to throw for 125 yards. I mean, he barely eclipsed 100 yards. And receivers, whether you're winning or whether you're losing, it doesn't really matter. They all kind of are the same, and they want the ball, and they want their targets. And now Sirianni, let's face it, his team is going into a massive game with the Steelers. They should be riding high. Now the elephant in the room is like, I got to get these guys all on the same page, specifically my wide receivers. And listen, I don't know if it's just we're reading too much into it and basically like our passing game's off. It needs to be better for us to win the whole thing. Or if it's simple, like I need more targets than what I just got, or Jalen's got to pick up a shit, or maybe there's some jealousy of Saquon, who has become this megastar. He's in the MVP conversation, and this guy just shows up, and we've been the stars here before this. Like we were the guys carrying the offense. Regardless of what it is, this is why being a head coach is so hard. Because obviously when your team sucks, when you're the New York Giants, or you're the Jacksonville Jags, and just it's a miserable experience, and trying to keep people in, your coaches, your players, is a difficult job requirement. Just because you're winning doesn't mean it's easy. And in a place like Philly, you could argue it's harder because there are so many people watching. Everyone's nitpicking every single play. It's like, God, you're just, drop pass away from losing that game to the Carolina, even though Carolina's been playing really well, almost beat the Chiefs. So it's not like, no, they're just almost lost this 3-19. Well, they're not your typical 3-19. They're playing pretty well. But if they would have lost that game at home, even though it was a trap game right before Baltimore and Pittsburgh, everyone would have freaked. And now your wide receivers are kind of acting weird. And it's hard. I mean, this is why these head coaches make so much money, because you're dealing with huge personalities, huge egos, guys making more money than you, guys that you need to win all the big games coming up, not just this weekend, but then in January and ideally in the Super Bowl. So good luck to Sirianni fixing this problem, because right now it feels like the receivers aren't too happy with their quarterback. I saw that this is good news for the NFL, that the Amazon Prime game, which is not shocking, between the Lions and the Packers, broke a record. Highest rated streaming game so far of this. I don't even want to call it an experiment, of this current package. Since Amazon has been in business with the NFL, they almost got 18 million people watching this. And you just saw the NBA, whatever, 6 months ago, maybe less than that, sign this massive television deal, and their ratings are plummeting by the year. Less and less people are watching professional basketball. And the NFL is increasing. And everyone talks shit like the sport's never been softer. It's never been a worse product, yet more and more people are watching. So the streaming situation, if you put, and listen, streaming has dabbled in these other sports, right? Apple dabbled on Friday Night Baseball. You could take an incredible matchup, Dodgers and Yankees, and put them on Amazon Prime, or take the best two basketball teams, right? The Bucks versus the Celtics, right? The Warriors versus LeBron and the Lakers. I know they're not the best teams, but you know what I mean. Big brands. A regular season game, I think you would struggle to get a couple million people that would stream it. And when you're talking about these type numbers, the potential for the NFL's next television deal, you just saw the NBA, who was struggling to keep people engaged with their product, triple, maybe not triple, but more than double their previous deal. Imagine what the NFL is about to do. Because it's one thing on broadcast network, right? CBS, Fox, NBC doing well. You start doing 17 to 20 million people watching these games. Wait till Christmas happens. What do you think those numbers are going to be on Christmas Day? They are going to be huge. So you have the power that on television, which they've always had. And now you have the streaming power. This thing is only the beginning. And I'm telling you, you could see this coming from a mile away. The shift is about to happen. My guess is this next television package has a huge Netflix presence. And maybe that is the Netflix Sunday morning international game. Maybe instead of CBS, Fox, like get all the games on Sunday, the morning and the afternoon window, maybe Netflix gets two games, a 10 a.m. West Coast kickoff and a 1 p.m. West Coast kickoff. Maybe they get two games each, and they pay, I don't know, $5 billion a year for that, for those two games. Whatever, I'm just throwing out the number, but my point is, these are type numbers, and this is the type ability to move the needle that is going to be extremely lucrative for the business. And their business includes a revenue split between the players and the teams. So you talk about salaries going up for the players. You talk about salaries only going up for coaches. You talk about valuations going up for teams. A rising tide lifts all boats. And when you see these numbers, 17 million people streamed a sporting event, football's the only thing that could sniff, I would say, 5+ million. And the NFL is the only thing. I'm not talking like a pay-per-view event. I'm talking sports. Hockey, basketball, baseball, golf, you name it. is this thing. And the NFL is unlike anything right now in this country when it comes to interest. And listen, it was a great matchup, Packers versus the Lions, but there's a reason that the Thursday night package has gotten better games because they want Amazon, obviously Netflix now with Christmas, they want them more involved. Why? Because they got the most money. Netflix and Amazon have more money than these other TV conglomerates. So when you see this new television deal, everyone's bitching and moaning about streaming. Buckle up because it's only the beginning. And if you told me that within 6, 7 years, streaming is the only option to watch the NFL, I don't think that's inconceivable. I've talked about this before, the radio situation. I think there are major radio stations where I come from in the Bay Area in Northern California with KNBR, which is one of the biggest sports stations in the history of radio. If you told me in 5 years it doesn't exist, I think it's on the table. So we're seeing the cable bundle just get destroyed exponentially week by week, year by year. So if you don't think by 2030 or 29, when this new television deal is on the table, that it's streaming only, you would be nuts. You would not be living in the same reality that I'm living in. And part of it is my business is very streaming oriented and having been more on terrestrial and traditional, mediums and then made the transition. Like I see the way everything's flowing and the growth that I don't, there's just no stopping it. And when you talk about this situation and the people they're in business with, the Amazons, the Netflix, like you might want to Google their market caps, and you might want to look at who they're competing against, and buckle up because if you're complaining about paying for streaming services now to watch the NFL, it's not going to slow down. And last but not least, we didn't talk about this on Sunday night was Juan Soto, who got a 15-year contract for over $750 million. And my first reaction, I would imagine, like most human beings, was, "Oh my god, that is insane," because that number is insane. Think who you would do a 15-year contract with in life. There aren't many business people, business partnerships you would do 15-year deals with. There just aren't. I would say your children, you don't really get to sign up for a partnership with them. They're just your children for life. Obviously, marriages in theory are lifelong, but 50% of them don't work. So a 15-year business deal is borderline unprecedented. And on the surface, I listen, it's insane. It's not good business. I think we all acknowledge that. Signing a baseball player at 26 years old to a 15-year contract is crazy. Now, there are stipulations after 5 years. He can opt out, but they can also opt in if they give him a raise at like $4 million per year, going from $51 million a year to $55 million a year. It's not about the nitty gritty of the contract because I would say more than likely at 30 years old, he opts into a $400, $500 million contract. And or the Mets just, give him the boost. But regardless, most people think this is crazy. And I would say this: Steve Cohen, who bought the Mets, who Axelrod, if you watch Billions, basically portrayed in that show. I Googled it today, and so I could be off a billion or two, is worth well over $20 billion. He's also 68 years old. So if you're him, and this is a little bit of the Belichick thing, and you've worked your whole life, and in the show Billions, there was a famous line that I will never forget where Axe says, "What's the point of having FU money if you never say FU?" And I think that sums up the situation. You've made all this money. You've been a killer on Wall Street for decades. You finally get the Mets. Your team's actually pretty good. And you're going head to head with the Yankees over this guy. And if you are going to argue, and because they were willing to kind of get pretty close to the number, why do I care what 35 to 40 looks like? Hell, I might not even be alive in 10 years. If you've seen Steve Cohen, I wouldn't say he's actually the pillar of health when you see his body type. But, like, I think sometimes these deals, I see it with Maria, who's now like involved in luxury real estate, and she's showing these homes, you know, a mile away from where we live in Arizona for 20 to 30 million dollars. And you know, one thing she says that never comes up is interest rates. She hasn't heard the word interest rate yet that she's worked with this new brokerage for over a couple months. You know why? Because those people, if you're buying a $28 million home in 2024, as crazy as it sounds, you're paying cash. And when you see Steve Cohen pay 750 million, it's not up front. This isn't an NFL contract, right? You pay as you go. You go, yeah, I'll give the guy a $75 million signing bonus and we'll figure it out as we go because I know how to make money. Is this contract great business? Of course not. Long term. But in the short term, which is all I care about, given that I'm 68, 69 years old, I've worked my entire life to accumulate all this money. I don't give a shit. And I want to steal him away from the New York Yankees, which I did. So is this deal going to age well? You would say probably not, because I'm not exactly Jason Stark or Peter Gammons here, but this isn't the athlete of Shohei Ohtani. Again, I don't have his defensive metrics, but watching the playoffs, I don't think he's a great defensive player. He's an all-time great hitter. He's like Ted Williams, right? He's just he's Tony Gwynn with pop. He's an elite hitter, but seems pretty nuts. But if I was worth $21 billion and I really wanted something, you know what I would do? I would probably do some pretty nutty things because I remember reading something one time that summed up what it was like to be a billionaire. And they said, imagine everything in life is free. So if you're Steve Cohen, you're like $750 million to sign this player. It doesn't change your life. It doesn't change your business. It doesn't change your outlook of your own franchise one iota. And if some of these other sports, like basketball, did not have a true cap, if football did not as well, you would see more of this type stuff happening. Now, I think big picture for the sport, is this healthy? Probably not. Right? I don't think it is. I don't have a solution. Like you shouldn't cap wages and stuff, but how many teams realistically could even think about doing this? Three or four. And thank God the Dodgers didn't get him because if he went to the Dodgers, we might as well just shut down the sport. But I think it's cool. And I'm glad Steve Cohen doesn't give a shit about the difference of $700 million and $750 million. It makes it very entertaining.